I wish I could blame what you're going to hear on having been struck by lightning, but I can't. So I want to begin with a disclaimer. The following words of Menachem Mendel Schneerson, the seventh Rebbe, from a discourse he delivered on the 4th of Cheshvan, 5725, or the 10th of October, 1964. This one I'll read in the Hebrew and translate the rest of my quotes because of time. I'll only give in English. V'achein tzricha liot arichut bezman. Ve'elu shechoshvim sheyicholim lefol zot b'miut zman, tov ma'at b'chavana, ein ken. Ela kasher mema'atim bezman, azai chaser b'chavana u've'emet, yesh tzorech b'hitbonenut hadoreshet arichut zman. Thus, an augmentation of time is necessary, and those who think that they can act within a reduction of time and a decrease in intention, this is not so. But rather, when there is a lessening of time, there is a lack of intention. In truth, there is need for contemplation that demands the augmentation of time. Now, he was talking about prayer, but I'm extending it beyond that. And unfortunately, I can't follow his wisdom because I don't have enough time to develop my presentation, and I was not able to prepare a longer version, so I partially, and more than partially, am fully to blame for this, but I will try to offer what I can in a truncated fashion. The context in which my thoughts were hatched, so to speak, is the larger question that Philip has posed to us through his many writings, which deal really with the problem of the individual and the community. And those who read my abstract know that I mentioned that this issue was already quite prevalent at the turn of the century, and particularly in the work of Gustav Landauer, who, utilizing the thought of Meister Eckhart, developed this idea of the Welt-Ich, the world I, in which he argued that true individuality is an expression of the community and vice versa, and that the deepening of one's sense of nationality was the ultimate justification and cause for Menschheit, for humanity more generally. And Landauer, of course, saw this as well as central to Jewish utopianism. This was picked up by Buber, who had argued similarly that the feeling of community, as he called it, or the sense of a community, embraced an awareness of the unity of the I in the world. And this extended to the inner self and what constituted the true existential particularity of each being. So the mystical experience grounds the idea that true individuality is expressive of community, and the latter can only grow out of a sense of an originary aloneness. The solitude of the contemplative union is precisely the womb that bears the possibility of genuine relationality. Those who are familiar with Philip's work know that he's been very much engaged with this problem. And I just want to zone in on one thing in his work, and then get to the Chabad material. And this is his reviving, as it were, of Buber's idea, picked up by Sholem, that Hasidism is Kabbalism turned ethos. Or in Sholem's words, Hasidism is practical mysticism at its highest. I think in part, as Philip acknowledges, he's building on this for his own argument regarding a resacralization and remystification of the religious turn in critical social theory, and utilizing Hasidism as a historical phenomenon that bridges the profane-sacred divide and offers a more profoundly spiritual construal of the social dynamics of everyday life. And I'll just very briefly quote from Mystical Sociology. Hasidism is additionally important beyond giving a more social face to mysticism. because it proclaims, analyzes, and embodies a model of social processes that is alternative to the ideology of modernity. Hasidism offers us also a theoretical alternative to modern social theory, and indeed also to critical theory. And so what I find most intriguing about Philip's analysis is the sense that the social is reconfigured in a way that is beyond the social. So what I want to investigate very briefly is this thesis. And think out loud, if a new model of the social is actually informed by what is called by Philip the cosmic interactionism. And using particularly Chabad's thought, if we can find a path of political reintegration analogous to contemporary notions of sociality and interconnectivity in the mystical discernment of what is called in Chabad thought the Atzmut Ein Sof, the essence of the infinite that infuses all reality. So what I will elicit from Chabad sources is an idea of the universal configured continually in light of the random and indiscriminate particular. So what I would call the universal singularity rather than a singular universality. An idea of wholeness that is sought in the fragmentariness of the essence, of the Atzmut. And in the Chabad lexicon, the Yichud Ilah, the supernal unity, that is realized in the Yichud Tata'a, the lower unity. And so this would be what I think is a novel take on this. Only through the radical plurality of being, the composability that comes about through the diffusion of the light of the infinite, can we comprehend and experience the incomposite oneness of the essence. So, how much time do I have left? I'm already running out of time. Not so bad. So, I want to begin here with another comment of the seventh Rebbe. And this is from a talk delivered on the second day of Shavuot 1960. Again, because of time constraints, I won't read in Hebrew, just the translation. The Besht wrote to Rabbi Adam, the master of the name, the reason why he did not want to be revealed, because he did not want any conflict. Eino rotzeh b'machloket. He didn't want any conflict, so he wanted to stay hidden to avoid conflict. Too bad I read this so late in life. And what was lacking in him when he was in solitude, studying the Torah with his teacher, who is known. In other words, he was lacking nothing. Rabbi Adam wrote him that this is the will of the Creator, Ratzon HaBoreh. And in any event, what does he care? In other words, why should he care about what people will say? Thus, from the letter, Rabbi Adam actualized for the Besht the matter of hishtavut, equanimity, that everything should be equanimous for him and nothing should concern him except to complete the supernal intention. So the Rebbe goes on to say that the letter proves that the revelation of the Besht in the world did not transpire b'derech kabbalat ol ukfiyah, through compulsion or coercion, but rather simply because the Besht came to understand that he had to do the will of the Creator. And the moral that the Rebbe derives from this story is that the actualization of this quality of equanimity, that I shouldn't care whether I'm criticized or be lured by being praised, is applied to the matter, this is the Rebbe's exact words, to the matter of spreading forth of the well springs of the inwardness of Torah, which must be done without any calculation, even the calculation with respect to the matter of peace, but only because it is the will of the Creator. And right after that, the Rebbe mentions the distinction made by Dov Ber, the Mittler Rebbe, in Shara Yichud, between two types of contemplation, has been discussed by a number of people, including Tali Lowenthal. The Hitbonenut Pratit, the contemplation of the particular, and the Hitbonenut Klalit, the contemplation of the universal. And that's the focus of my talk in the time that remains. In fact, this distinction can be traced to the Alter Rebbe, Shneur Zalman of Liadi. And the particular source is Ma'amarei Admor Hazaken in Yanim, Volume 1. And there, Shneur Zalman begins with a very interesting comment that contemplation is not merely a cognitive matter, and Hitbonenut is what I'm translating as contemplation, but it is a delving deep into a matter, so it leads one to the fear of the love of the divine. Then he goes on to say that the essence of contemplation is to be discerned from how each day the divine renews the creation from nothing to something. And in each and every moment, he brings forth and sustains all the worlds from nothing to something. So what are we to make of this juxtaposition of the contemplation and kratio ex nihilo? So what he seems to be saying is that the contemplation is discerned from this transition from nothing to something. But in the Chabad understanding of this traditional theological belief, this demands us to speak of the drawing out of something from nothing to the extent that we comprehend that everything amounts to and is integrated in this nothing. So it's a way of seeing that alters reality, a specularity that divests the universe of its gross physicality, restoring the multiplicity of all being to the indistinct and indifferent one that comprehends everything. That is the nothingness of every being. Okay, so the goal of the contemplation is to get to a point where we discern that everything is haya kalo haya, would be as if it were not, whence one comprehends that everything is ayin ve'efes mamash. Nothing, and how should we translate efes here? Void, maybe. Nothing and void, but mamish. Okay, so that's the contemplative task. And then he goes on to distinguish, and I really don't have time to develop this more fully. He goes on to develop the difference between hitbonenut bichlal, right, which is contemplation of the universal or the general, where the goal is to plumb the depth of the matter of the general, enacted through the negation of the matter as it comes forth. But this is a form of contemplation that involves tzimtzum, constriction, and not hitrachvut, not expansion. And there is, the Alter Rebbe already said, and is developed much more by his son, a great danger in this mode of contemplation. One thinks one is totally focused on the sense of nothing, but in fact, as a consequence, it can lead to a kind of spiritual egotism and creating a greater something out of this sense of being nothing. So while the goal is this klal, the universal, what is recommended is the hitbonenut befrat, to be engaged in the details, in the particularities, which is of course the dira batachtonim, the world of finitude and discrimination and differentiation. Because this kind of contemplation leads to the penetration of knowledge into truth, ha'amakat hada'at be'emet. And this entails the hitrachavut hamoach, the expansion of consciousness. And the Alter Rebbe compares this to pshat. You wouldn't expect it. The seeking for the pshat, the literal sense of the biblical text, always involves a multivalency of meaning. Really interesting idea, I think. All right, so as I said, this is developed further, much more detail by the Mittler Rebbe. I don't really have time to develop it, but the sum of it is that the goal is ultimately to conjoin the particular to the universal. But there is no way to truly access the universal but through the particular, right? So the Gilui Or Elohi B'nafsho Yoter, right? The greater disclosure of the divine light in the soul comes about as a consequence of being entangled in the boundless multiplicity that constitutes the world of discrimination. And so only through contemplating that the somethingness of all discriminate beings emerges from and returns to the Ayin Ve'efes Muchlat, the absolute nothing, which is the essence of the infinite, does one apprehend the nothingness at the core of one's being, which leads to the Bitul HaYesh, the self-annihilation, and then ultimately to the Bitul B'Mitziut, the annihilation of existence. But this comes about through the particulars. And the Mittler Rebbe has a wonderful expression, klal prati, right, which I would render as singular universal. And it's from the singular universal that one discerns the supernal singularity, mimenu yavi l'hasagat davar prati ha'elyon, until one comprehends the universality of the universal. Sheyavo l'chlal ha'hasaga b'chlaliyot. A state of consciousness that is also referred to figuratively as envisioning the glory of the king. So here's the key point. Kasher yitchaber kol ha'iyun mikol ha'pratim el ha'klal, az yukba yoter b'nefesh b'chinat ha'klal. When the meditation joins all the particulars into the universal, then the aspect of the universal is fixed in the soul. So now I come to my concluding remarks. There's much more to say about this, but and it sort of behooves me to conclude here. And here I'm somewhat responding to Ellie's invocation of my discussion, Open Secret. For which I am, of course, grateful for the Sprachdenken, for the dialogue. But the socio-political usefulness of this paradigm, which I find from an intellectual point of view to be astounding, frankly, right? Because Chabad thought got to a place where postmodern thought has gotten to in terms of this universal singularity, of understanding that within the Achdut Pshuta, the incomposite unity that is the Atzmut, that is the essence, isn't a negation of the particulars, but it's actually constituted by the particularity of the particulars. But the social political usefulness of this depends very much, I think, on the possibility of transforming the ideal of an ethnic particularity, which of course is related to the notion of chosenness or election, that is exceptionally inclusive to an ideal of exemplarity that is inclusively exceptional. The inclusion of the excluded in the traditional claim to exclusivity, and this I think extends to the campaign of the 7 Noahide laws, only renders the inclusivity even more exclusive. Now, one would be hard-pressed to rationalize or justify such a claim to exceptionality masked under the pretense of universality. Now, if I may, many years ago I wrote in Venturing Beyond, the particular path of the Jewish mystical experience leads out of the specificity of this one tradition, but it does so in a manner that compels walking the path repeatedly to find the way out. If one contemplates the possibility of following the path to get beyond the path definitively, then one is off the path, and thus will never get beyond the path. To traverse the path of law, one must travel the path lawfully. In my estimation, this is a distinctive feature of the mystical phenomenon in the history of religions. Now, I guess I should stop here, but let me just tell you, and with a lighter note perhaps. It is told of Woody Guthrie that when he was admitted to the Greystone Park Psychiatric Hospital, he was asked to fill out a form. And when it came to the question of identifying his religion, he said, "Put down all." And reviewing the form, the attendant nurse admonished Guthrie that he had to choose one religion, to which he responded, "If it ain't all, then it's none." Now, prima facie, it might seem that Guthrie was espousing a form of comparativism that we would reject today. But perhaps in a more nuanced way, we can say that he was championing the gnosis that has enlightened mystics in many religions and spiritual disciplines through the ages. To appreciate what is the same, one must be attuned to what is different, not because difference is a repetition of the same, but because the same is a replication of difference. In my judgment, this wisdom is found in the Chabad understanding of contemplation. The question that I think is truly vital for the future is to figure out a way in which Chabad can become that path that leads away from the path. That is a path that is both paved and subverted by the very traversing of the path. I don't know how this is accomplished, but I am quite sure that there is no overcoming except by undergoing.